Yo, welcome to Sig Slayers, the comic interview show, period. I'm Mike the Sig Slayer, chilling with Mark the Honorable Villain. What up, fam?
What's up, Mike? We have a revolutionary creator joining us today. This man took it to the limit and he changed the game. Let him know who we got, man.
Joining us today, we have one of the Image founders, Erik Larsen, joining us. But before we chat with Erik, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and please comment. All right, let's get to it. Our next guest is one of the great creators in all of comics. You've seen his work in The Savage Dragon, Amazing Spider-Man. He is one of the founding fathers of Image Comics. I repeat, he is one of the founding fathers of Image Comics. Ladies and gentlemen of the Stash Land, we bring to you the one and only Erik Larsen. How you doing, Erik?
Jeez, man, I don't know if I can live up to that build-up.
Hey, man, you already did. You deserve it. That's why we gave it to you, man. Erik, it's such a great honor to have you on the show. We're going to just dive right on in. Since it's your first time joining us, Erik, we like to get your comic book origin story. In other words, how did you get your first gig in pro comics?
All right. So, God, how far back do I go?
Who gave you your first job? How'd you get it?
I self-published a fanzine when I was 19 years old with a couple of buddies.
Yeah.
So that was like the first thing I did that saw print. Prior to that, I was drawing my own comics as a little kid since like 4th, 5th grade. So I had just piles and piles of comics that I drew as a little kid, characters I created when I was a little kid, all this stuff. I was telling my own stories. My characters were teaming up with Marvel and DC characters because I didn't know anything about copyright and it wasn't being published anyway. So when I was 19, me and a couple pals published a book called Graphic Fantasy. And then that kind of gave me some samples that I could show to some people. And a couple guys who bought my fanzine through the mail ended up hiring me to do work for them. One was a guy named Gary Carlson, did a book called Megaton. So that's kind of my first pro thing. But then from that, I had sort of got a little bit of a body of work through him. And then I showed some stuff to Jim Shooter at a convention. And he's looked through all the stuff that I was doing. He's like, "Oh, you're a pro now." I was like, "Yes, I am." And so that we co-plotted an issue of Thor at the convention, and I went home and drew it up. And at that point, I had the awesome samples that I could show to everybody else, and that kind of opened up the gates for me to do stuff over at Eclipse Comics and DC, and I did fill-in issue with Amazing Spider-Man pretty early on. That was pretty rough, and I ended up settling on my first kind of regular ongoing gig was I did the Doom Patrol at DC for about a year, and then that led to me doing the Punisher over at Marvel, and I did just 5 issues of that. That's all I could take, and then that led to a serial in Marvel Comics Presents with Excalibur, and then that led to Amazing Spider-Man.
The rest is history after that.
Erik, you talked a little bit about the fanzine. I wanted to ask about the inception of the character, the dragon, and for Graphic Fantasy, do you still own any of those copies?
Yeah, because copies got out to other people. So, like, my house burned down in 1991.
Oh, wow.
So everything that I owned at that point gone. But I got friends and family, that sort of thing. So they had kept copies of stuff, and so the other buddies that I did comics with, they had copies. So I ended up getting some of those back.
Okay.
And have those to this day.
And what was it about the character, the dragon, that you wanted to carry over to all the way to the launch of Image?
I don't know. I mean, he started off as kind of a Batman riff, he would wear a cape and cowl and run around and solve crimes. And then as time went on, I got tired of drawing all the accompaniment, so I just made him a green skin dude. And then for whatever reason, I guess I had enough history with him that I just sort of felt like, oh, here's my dude. So it's maybe just pure laziness or whatever, but it just seemed like, all right, I've got this guy. I might as well use this guy.
Eric, I wanted to switch over to your time at Marvel. In 1990, you replaced Tom McFarlane on The Amazing Spider-Man. First, tell us what it was like landing a gig on a flagship title like Amazing Spider-Man, and who in your mind is the ultimate Spider-Man artist?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I mean, it's a good gig. Spider-Man was never he was never like my favorite guy. So it was like, I know this is a great gig and I should take this great gig, but I always thought of myself as more of a Kirby guy than a Ditko guy.
Yeah.
So for me, Spider-Man was something of a stretch where I was like, there's some stuff I need to learn, and doing some of those kind of spidery poses and stuff like that. And I also knew going into it that Todd was a big fan favorite, and so the pressure was on. When I had taken on Doom Patrol, I had followed Steve Lytle, and he had a bit of a fan following, and I did nothing to ease the transition from his work to mine. It was pretty abrupt. So, and fan reaction was basically, what the hell is this? So when I followed Todd, I was like, all right. Thankfully, we're somewhat in the same ballpark of, our work was a little bit cartoony, not super realistic. So at least it had that going for it. But I also like, okay, he's doing funky borders, I got to do funky borders. There's certain things that I'm like, I need to make sure that I carry over some of this stuff, or because I can't do what I did on Doom Patrol, because that would just be a disaster. But it seemed to work. So the audience, we managed to retain. So it's like, okay, whew.
So
right.
After Spider-Man, after Amazing Spider-Man, you hopped over to the Spider-Man title for a little bit, just before leaving Marvel. We wanted to get into your headspace a little bit back then on what was some of the push-pull factors that made you want to leave Marvel and join the venture of Image Comics.
Well, the thing was that I felt like the editor on Spider-Man had said that he wanted to turn it into something akin to what DC was doing with Batman Legends of the Dark Knight, which was an ongoing book where they would have people come on and do an arc, and then somebody else would come on and do another arc. So I didn't think when I got that book that it was quote unquote my book to stay on. Like, I was just a guide who did his story, and it was time to move on. I had pitched a Nova as an ongoing series at Marvel, and I had been contacted by somebody at DC about taking over and doing a Lobo miniseries. So I had both of those things that were sort of sitting there waiting for me, and I was like, well, they're just miniseries, so why don't I do a Savage Dragon miniseries over at this Image Comics outfit, see how that works out, and then ended up doing that, not the other stuff.
Making history, man, you just make it seem like I was gonna mess around and make history, change the comic book industry.
I don't know that any of us were really like, screw the man. I think it was more of a case of us just going, I want to see how this works. Will the audience who's following me on this thing come on over and follow me on this other thing? My somewhat of a concern going into it was, well, Savage Dragon is really different from Spider-Man. It's not like you'd be like reading one and going, oh, this is more of the same on this other thing. Whereas I think some of the other guys were going, I'm doing this thing, I'm going to do a similar thing.
Yeah.
I was really like, well, this is the character I got, so I got to do this dude. But it was more my Kirby roots, and it's like I got to do this. But it seemed to work out, right? So.
Yeah, it did definitely. So
can't complain. But it's not like I felt like they were giving me the shaft or they were terrible to me or anything else. I got along pretty fine with whoever it is I was working with at the time, and but yeah, it sort of started off with me and Rob and Valentino, and then Todd joined, and then he went on actively recruiting everybody. But I think most of us were kind of wary going into it, like, oh, is this thing going to work or not? So we all mostly started with miniseries, and then Todd was the first guy who's just like, all right, you guys, I'm going for it. I was like, all right, Todd.
I want to talk about 90s comics for a second, because 90s represents the pinnacle of comic book sales. I mean, and I don't think it'll ever be surpassed. I mean, six figures were like water back then, just like the commonplace.
It was a good day.
It was a good day. The good times was a rolling. And so I just want to get from your perspective, because I mean, you represent that pinnacle.
All right.
Can you tell us what was so big about the comics in the 90s? I mean, we know comics was selling well before X-Men #1 and the death of Superman. So what was it about comics in the 90s that people were just flocking to the shops or 7-Elevens to get books?
I think it was just a bunch of different things all kind of working together. It's just, the fans really seemed to respond to the artwork that was going on with mostly the Image guys, so there was a lot of like, hey, this is something big. And then Marvel had done that whole thing with we're going to do Spider-Man #1, and then it was like, oh, we're going to do X-Force #1, and now we're do X-Men again #1. So they were kind of playing into the collectors thing, and those things suddenly once they got to be mainstream news stories, then that became a bigger and bigger and bigger deal. When Image Comics came around and we had announced, we were on CNN, and, news was just reaching the regular people. And, when the death of Superman came around, it's like, people know about the death of Superman. That was on the news everywhere.
Right.
So a lot of these things just became news stories. It was breaking out into the regular world. And there was something really exciting about what we were doing, because it was like, we're all kids. I was in my 20s when Image started, so it's like comics by kids for kids in a way. We were just, we didn't know what the hell we were doing, but we came out swinging.
I want to talk more about that, about the beginning of Image Comics. You guys were a bunch of artists. You guys were cartoonists. What were some of the challenges about starting a comic book line?
The challenges? Well, I think most of us had never started anything from scratch before. We would all had taken over books that had been ongoing. So when you're starting something from scratch, it's like, some of the early conversations were, well, what's Earth like? Who's the president? That's sort of like the most basic stuff. And I think we all kind of did our own rules anyway. But there was some real basic things that needed to be figured out in terms of just the structure of the world. And then once you kind of have a bit of that, then it was okay. Well, your characters, what niche are you filling, and what can I get from that, and what's the other guy doing, and what can I pull from that, just to try and make it so it's a cohesive world, and that there's not a lot of repetition within the different guys all doing, if everybody's doing a Batman riff, it's like, okay, can't have 6 Batman. So there's a little bit of just looking over each other's shoulders and making sure you're kind of going to a somewhat different audience than the other guy. And, you know, but so is, you're starting off with a book. I think a lot of us kind of, if you read the books, it seems like some of them read like the sixth issue of an ongoing series rather than the first issue of one. And I think that's because people didn't really know how to start something because they hadn't done it before. It's like, oh, this is all new to us. So it's like you read the first issue of Youngblood, and it's like, these guys seem like they've been around a while. How come we're not getting the story of the group coming together for the first time? But Savage Dragon.
That's probably why people liked it, though.
Well, I think, it starts off with people slugging already, so it's like, hey, things are already moving.
Yeah.
Savage Dragon 1 was his first day on the force, so we did get sort of a beginning with that dude, at least. And I think Todd did start Spawn off kind of in a beginning kind of way.
Right.
But I think with Wildcat seemed like it had been going a while, and they had just got a new member of the team. So it was a little like, all right, we haven't quite figured out how to do a lot of this stuff, but time goes on and we figure it out.
Man, and you are throwing me alley-oops right here, because my next question deals with the evolution of Image Comics. And the comics that were swirling around, like the ones you mentioned in the 90s, are drastically different than the comics that we see from Image Comics on the shelves today. And you guys are pound for pound the best comic book publisher in the business. So can you just speak on that evolution from like the 90s to now, just whatever comes to mind?
I mean, mostly it's just, once the idea got out there that, hey, you can do whatever the hell you want, that became a different thing as the years went on, because it's like the complaint all along was, hey, everything is superheroes. And in the 80s and the 90s, that was really like this, gosh, can you guys think of doing anything other than superheroes? Every book is superheroes everywhere from every company. Are there no other genres that can take off? What's going on here? And then once Image was going and we were all doing our own thing and we started off doing superheroes, people were coming on board going, I want to do something else. I want to tell a horror story, or I want to tell a Western, or I want to do a fantasy story. And we're sitting there going, that's fine. You can do whatever the hell you want. We're not saying to anybody, hey, you've got to participate in an Image universe. If you want to do your own self-contained little world and tell your own story, by all means, have at it. And so that's kind of how that came about. They're just new guys who got the message that you can do anything you want, but didn't necessarily get the message, hey, you got to play in our sandbox. So it's been kind of cool, and that's also been kind of like, but I want to do a crossover, and it's like, so in some part, it's like, oh, there's not really that many characters or things that I can have my character, interact with other people anymore, but whatever.
Bonus question real quick, Mark, because you just threw me another lob. Savage Dragon was in Killadelphia. Speak on that. Speaking of crossovers.
That's just, he asked and I said, okay. I mean, really a lot, and that's kind of how it's been. And my own thing with Savage Dragon has been, if you're publishing a book at Image Comics and you want to use one of my characters, the answer is yes. And I kind of come into it. I don't think I've said to anybody during the last 33 years, no, you can't use Savage Dragon if it's an Image Comics. If it's someplace else, another company, forget it. I mean, it's got to be, I mean, every now and then there'll be something that I'm like, oh, okay, we're buddies. Okay, you can use them. But for the most part, I've just been going, hey, one of the perks of Image Comics is you can use my dude.
Awesome.
Eric, you've taken various roles within Image outside of being a creator.
Mhm.
Can you speak on
Uh-huh.
your various roles within Image?
I mean, right now I'm what, the CFO,
Yeah.
uh, which is, I mean, we have to sort of contractually have different people and different. Uh, I mean, every one of the founders has got some kind of a thing,
Yeah.
but that's not a real job. That's just a ceremonial thing. When I was the publisher for that short while, I was the publisher, and I was, uh, actively out there talking to people and trying to recruit guys and trying to put books together and stuff like that. But uh, yeah, as CFO, I don't do really anything.
Yeah.
When there's image stuff that we really need to vote on as a company, and that does come up because there'll be something will be, hey, the distributors are falling apart. We need to find a new distributor. These are the different deals that are being offered, and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll get in on that call, and I'll participate in that. Um, that's sort of, but for the most part, day to day, there's not a lot of image business that I need to participate in. Mostly, I can sit there and write and draw my own comic.
Awesome.
Yeah, which is what I wanted to do. I mean, I got into this because I wanted to make comics. So,
Speaking of which, Savage Dragon is the longest running American comic produced by the same writer artist. Savage Dragon is almost like a childhood character, right? It's like you've been had this dragon character for years,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
I've had him for 50 plus years at this point.
yeah, 50 plus years. So I mean, so you kind of alluded to it, Eric, but talk to more specifically about officially starting Savage Dragon. At the beginning of Image, was there pressure or was there just that excitement because you could do what you want?
I mean, it was a little of everything. See, when I was a kid, I did comics, and I had I mean, I created them when I was just a tiny little kid, right?
Mhm.
So none of the comics that I drew when I was a real little kid made a lot of sense because I was like, I didn't know how the world worked. I don't know any of this stuff. So I I had told all these stories when I was a little kid, and the stories I published in Graphic Fantasy, that fanzine, were kind of the end of everything that I had done as a kid. So it's like I'm working out to this point. And I got to there, told these two stories and two issues of Graphic Fantasy, and at that point I became a pro and went and did other stuff for like 10 years before I got back to it. And so what I did when I came on Image was, well, my thought was, I've got these two stories that I did when I was 19. So I want to start at a different place, and I want to work towards those two stories and eventually work them into my continuity. And at that point, I'm free. I can go whatever direction I want to. So I started with the idea that Dragon will eventually be the head of a government super team, and then he's going to retire to raise his daughter away from the chaos of being in this government super team. So I was like, okay, where can I start that ends up there? And I just thought, okay, well, if he's a police officer, that could maybe lead toward doing government work and stuff like that. So that's where the police officer thing came from. Also, I had a buddy who was a cop, and I was like, all right, I know a little bit about this, so let me go from there. But yeah, now I have people going, what? I don't understand why Dragon's in space. He shouldn't be in space. Dragon's a cop. He should be. It's like, no. In my brain, he was never. That was never a permanent gig. That was always like. That was just a means to an end, I was like, I need to get to here, so I need to start somewhere.
Okay, so now I want to get and talk about your process, this 30 plus year production of Savage Dragon. Has the way you produced changed over the years, like traditional versus digital? What are your steps to laying out a page?
Well, I've dabbled with digital a little bit, but I didn't really take to it. Mostly the processes I just at this point. At this point, I just start drawing the book, and then when I get to page 20, I publish. I mean, it's very, very basic. It used to be when I had it lettered on the physical artwork up until issue 187, I think. So in those days, what I would do is I would sit down and I would pencil out my 20 pages, and then I'd send them off to the letterer. I'd script half of it while it was in transit. The letterer would get it the next morning, start lettering the book, and send me pages back. And so when I would get pages back, I would start inking on it. Now, because everything's done digitally in terms of lettering, I'll just start penciling and inking, and I can do it a page at a time. Just be like, here's page. I've got an idea for the first 6 pages, so I'll do the first 6 pages, and then I'll worry about the rest of it once I got those done. And then it'll be from there going, okay, time to do page 7. What do we got? I don't write a script at this point. I don't write a plot. I just go in with an idea of what's going to be in the issue and kind of make it up as I go. But since I have an idea of where I'm going, it's not like I'm sitting here going, I don't know what to do. I have an idea going, all right, here's my basic outline, but it's all in here,
It's in your head, okay.
Yeah, and when I get to the page, I'm like, I can be very spontaneous and very much like, I don't feel like drawing that. Here comes the invaders, Spacemen are landing on the next page because I just felt like drawing that. Or, hey, they step into another dimension because I felt like drawing that. Or any number of things just because I gotta please everybody, and I mostly gotta keep myself entertained as an artist. And there's a constant war with the writer because the writer's sitting there going, no, we got to set all this stuff up. And the artist is going, I just want to draw the cool fights and have all sorts of fun. And so it's a real battle of wills.
Being that Savage Dragon's been in publication for so long, continuous, done pretty much solely by you and a letterer and colorist, or do you do the coloring as well?
I have colored and I have lettered, and I don't want to. So I got other guys to do that. I've dabbled in all this stuff. I think there are people who are better qualified to do that sort of thing. So it's like, okay, let me do that.
So what keeps you doing Savage Dragon? What makes you want to keep it going and keep that legacy going? Because it seems like at any beck and when you could just create something and just go in a different direction.
Yeah.
Why Savage Dragon 30 something plus years nonstop?
Well, it's because I set the book in real time, so characters keep getting older and older, and I just have goals within the book where I'm like, I want to get to this point. A goal early on was, I want to get to those issues that I drew as a kid. I want to get there. And then once I was beyond that, it was, okay, well, I want to get to an issue 100. That would be awesome to have done 100 issues. And then it was, I want to do more issues than Jack Kirby did of Fantastic Four. I got to top that. And then it became, so everything became a goal. And then, now it's, well, Dave Sim did 300 issues of Cerebus. I got to do more than that. So,
man, that's like some Michael Jordan shit, man. You creating like competition in your mind, dude. I love it.
It's like, I got 23 issues till I catch up with Dave Sim. At which point I would be like, all right, now let's really try to lap him on that. Can we get to 400? Let's see if we can get to 500. And that's like, oh, holy crap. I mean,
Fantastic.
at some point, I suppose I'll just die, and then that'll be the end of it. But on the way there, there just seems like there's certain things that I want to get to, and right now there's just stories that I want to get to that are just hanging out there. It's like, oh, I can't stop before I get to that because that's too cool, you know.
Eric,
But like right now the book stars Dragon's son Malcolm, and Malcolm has kids. So really, my goal is I want to get one of those kids to be the lead character of the book, and that's going to take some years, because I got the book set in real time. Uh, Three of those kids turned 10 this year. It's like, I don't know if I want to do a book about a 10-year-old just yet. So I got a few more years of Malcolm, where and it's like, okay, well, where am I going with that? And where, there's always just this plan and this plan and this plan. In the meantime, I can't just go right to the big climax. I've got to be like, all right, you got to stagger this stuff a little. So there ends up being all sorts of other stuff I need to shove in there before I get to that. I
So,
mean, it's part of me is like, oh, I got to do this as a great writing thing, and the other part is, I want it to look cool, So there's all this stuff going on.
Eric,
I'm trying.
Savage Dragon was an animated show. How'd you get that show developed, and how were you involved?
Um, I don't, I don't remember. I know a bunch of us had signed up at CAA, uh, and so we had agents that were out there stomping around trying to get stuff made. Uh, uh, we pitched. There was a company called, I think, Nelvana that wanted to pitch Savage Dragon to CBS, and then Universal had contacted me about doing Freak Force, and so that was also going to be CBS. So we had pitched two different shows. Mark Evanier had written, I think, a pilot episode of Savage Dragon, and we pitched it to CBS, and ultimately CBS passed on it. And then, uh, I don't remember how it was that we ended up taking it to USA Network, but Nelvana ended up not being the people that I stuck with because I kind of didn't like the initial script that was done. Sorry, Mark. And so there were other people going, well, we can do this. And I don't know how all these pieces got together because I think CAA kind of connected a lot of the dots of, well, this person's interested over here. These people over there are interested in doing a show. So can you pitch it here? And like, all right, whatever. I don't care. I don't care that much. Mostly I just want to do my comic. And if you guys want to make a cartoon, more power to you. But my focus is always on, I just want to do this cool comic over here. If that'll help me do my comic, awesome. And initially there was a lot of scripts, but they would send me a script, I would read over it, I would add whatever notes were on there because they didn't always figure out what the characters were about. And so I was like trying to make some of the dialogue snappier, and if there was something that was straight up wrong, because at that point Dragon's origin wasn't out there. So there was, in my head, I'm sitting there going, well, I can't have you do some story where he's finding out something about his origin that is flat out wrong. So I gotta at least curtail that part of it. And I didn't completely do it very well, but whatever. Mostly it was like I just thought that this would help the series, the comic book series. I just wanted to keep that going. So if this gets me some attention and some eyeballs, and more power to it. Um,
Eric,
and I mostly I didn't want to be in the way. It's like if you guys know what you want to do, I don't want to be the guy who's just saying, no, let's not do that. No, let's not do this. It's like, go for it, man.
Eric, you've done it all. You've drawn stories, you've written stories, you've drawn stories, or you've written stories for other people. What's your preferred role? To do it all, or to do a single piece of it?
Uh, well, I don't like drawing other people's stories that much because they always have me draw stuff that I don't do very well. So that is always a challenge of just going, oh crap, I've never drawn that before. I don't know what that looks like. I need to figure that out. Um, Although it probably helps me grow as an artist, for whatever that's worth. But but I just find it frustrating. I kind of like doing it all, but then I do run up against walls where I'm sitting there going, I don't know how to do this that I want to do, but I'm incapable of. Uh, I kind of like writing for other people, but that can be its own. That lends itself to its own problems, where you've got artists who are incapable of uh, telling a story very well, and that has been a problem where you're sitting there going, I want to set up this thing, you're not helping. How do I do this? So there have been a few cases where I ended up uh, doing sketches for other artists just as a look, do this, just follow this right here, it'll be fine, leave me room for copy. Because there would be some artists who would leave all sorts of room for copy, um, on pages where people weren't talking very much, and no room where people were supposed to be chatting away. And so that would be a real challenge. I've always worked what's called Marvel style, which is you start with a plot, and then you draw the plot, and then you script after the pages have been drawn.
Hey,
I don't do full scripts at all. I've only written a full script for one artist, and that was for Jim Aparo on an Aquaman story, because he had never drawn from a plot before, and I guess he wasn't going to start with me. But all the other times I've either drawn plots for people, which I used to do at one point for a bunch of the Savage Dragon backups. I would just send people, like, here's a 6-pager, and it's already kind of drawn in this crappy way. You can stick with what I've done, or you can go off and do something else, but at least it's a start. But it can be a real challenge when you get artwork back that looks nothing like what you had pictured in your head, and suddenly I got to write dialogue to this, and I can't. I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. You do the best you can. It's all fun to do in some ways. It's fun to ink other artists. That's, you can just kind of put your brain on hold and just draw on top of stuff that's already been drawn and make it into something. That's fun, as long as their pencils aren't very tight. If their pencils are super tight and I just am supposed to be just following it line for line, that's no fun. But if their art's a little rough and there's stuff that's open for interpretation, it's like, okay, here we go.
I like that. So you like a little bit of everything, but all in all, you would prefer to do it yourself.
Mostly I'd prefer to do it myself. Yeah, because I don't like penciling for other artists for the most part, because it just seems like there's a duplication of efforts in that. respect, like I can ink over some pencils that are pretty rudimentary, and that's what I'll do for myself. Is I'll do kind of rough pencils. But if I'm giving those to somebody else, they're gonna be like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what you want with this background. I don't know. It's like, God, I need to draw it all. And if I'm drawing it all, why don't I just have a pen in my hand and just cut you out of the equation? Because you're a pain in the ass.
Hey, Erik, you have accomplished more in your career than most people will ever have in the comic book industry, will ever achieve. Is there something that you're most proud of in your career?
No, I mean the run of Savage Dragon, but that's a lot, you know? It's like at this point it's nearly 300 issues. It's like, I guess I couldn't answer anything other than that. I like that the book is set in real time. I like that characters are getting older as the book unfolds. And that to me has been a real challenge, because it's just all kinds of stuff that you're not thinking about when you don't do it that way. You know, regular comics, like no time is passing, basically. And in this, suddenly it's like, hey, a month has got to go by. You better start making those kids look a little older, and you know, and a month has gone by for everybody else too. So, you know, if a villain shows up again and you haven't been in the book for 6 years, you know, what physical changes has gone on with that guy, and how are things with him? You know, let's put a beard on that dude. Have some salt and pepper showing up in this, you know, or whatever. Hey, he's put on a few pounds. You know, and there's fun stuff to play around with that. I guess I'm proud of Savage Dragon. I'm so proud.
Well, I would say so. I dig that, man, because you've been with the character for most of your life. I mean, 50 something.
Yeah.
Years,
At this point, yeah, I've been drawing Savage Dragon more than anything else. So it's like, okay, cool. 33 years. That's a big chunk of my existence on this planet. Holy crap.
We're on our very last question. Is there something that we haven't talked about that you want the fans to know about? Any upcoming projects? Any Savage Dragon announcements?
No,
any upcoming appearances?
No, not really. I mean, I pretty much put it out there when I got stuff to do and say. I mean, the thing is, the problem is I want to do everything, you know? Because it's like I look at all these comics and go, I wouldn't mind doing some more Spider-Man. I wouldn't mind doing some Hulk. I wouldn't, you know, all these characters that I grew up with as a kid, just going, oh, give me a run on Captain Marvel. I'll show you a thing or two. But, you know, you just run into this physical limitations of, oh, dude, you can't do everything because you just can't, you know? Oh, crap. So, I mean, I can't. You can't help it. I'm just such a fan of all this stuff. You just have a love for all these characters. You can't help but go, oh man, you know what you should have done? You should have done. It's like, shut up, man. Get your own book done. Okay.
Are you hitting any conventions this year? Do you do a lot of Comic-Con?
I'm doing the Chicago show in like a couple weeks.
Oh, so C2E2?
C2E2?
Yeah.
They just asked me, and I'm like, all right, what the hell? But I go to New York Comic Con every year, hang out at Artist Alley, stay with a buddy of mine. I'm in San Francisco, so you know when the San Francisco shows up, I'm there for that.
That's cool. C2E2 New York. We'll see you in New York.
Yeah, I'll see you there. Awesome. No, I mean, I don't mind going to shows, but it does take a lot out of you. You know? It's like, man, I got a schedule. I got books to do.
Yes.
So.
Well, Erik, thank you so much, man. This has been a treat. Thank you for joining us. Just want you to know you always have a home here on the Sig Slayers station. If that means anything to you, we just appreciate the hell out of it. Thank you so much.
One more home. All right.
There we go. Well, that's all for our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe and hit the like button. This is Sig Slayers. I'm Mike, speaking for Mark and Erik Larsen. We are out.
Hey.
Peace.
Sig Slayers.